great crowds were traveling with Jesus, and he turned and addressed them. If anyone comes to me without hating his father and his mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Which of you wishing to construct a tower does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if there is enough for its completion? Otherwise, after laying the foundation and finding himself unable to finish the work, the onlookers should laugh at him and say, "This one began to build but did not have the resources to finish." Or what king marching into battle would not first sit down and decide whether with 10,000 troops he can successfully oppose another king, advancing upon him with 20,000 troops? But if not, while he is still far away, he will send a delegation to ask for peace terms in the same way. Any one of you who does not renounce all his possessions cannot be my disciple. The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to Lord Jesus Christ. So this is kind of a controversial, because when with this interpretation, it says, well, why does Jesus want me to hate my father and mother and wife and children, brothers and sisters? Right? That's kind of, have you guys heard that before?
Yes.
That's something where, and so actually the word missalin is, they call it a Semitic hyperbole for love less. So hate, it's not, I mean, in that word it says love less. And so there should be a proper ordering. So God should be first, right? And then everything else below that. Love less. Our first love has to be God, but everything else is loved less. We're not making an idol even of these relationships. And so we have to be careful about that. But we got to have things ordered in God. And kind of the thing that's kind of ironic about it is that if we love God with our whole heart and soul, we'll end up loving all of these other, wife, children, brothers, and sisters more. If we love God first, then God will supply us with his Holy Spirit and his love, and we'll have the ability to love other people as opposed to just selfishly loving. And so that's kind of the ironic part of it. But I think that's the first point that I wanted to really, there is this demand, though, that Jesus has, right? There is a demand that we have this ultimate allegiance to him, and that all our other bonds that we have has to be ordered under that. But then we go right on from that to whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. That's terrifying.
But true. I mean, we all have crosses.
Right, I know, but I mean, when we're saying crosses, we're not talking about
Thank God.
the brutality of that cross. And so when Jesus is addressing them, he's talking about whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. So what happened with the cross? I mean, at that time it was suffering, shame, there's loss of control. I mean, all this is part of it. And we may be giving up everything, including our life. And that's still happening for Christians. I mean, it may be not here in America at this point in time, but that's happening worldwide still, where you're a Christian. If you became a Christian during the early period, and they were completely persecuted. We talked about that in the last few weeks. They were thrown out of the temple. They often had no food, no family. Where are they going to get? I mean, their whole group was this Jewish community. Once you're ex-templified, kind of like excommunicated. I mean, it's you're on the outside, and people, you're unclean. They wouldn't have anything to do with you. And so that's why Paul and the rest of them were bringing provisions to the people in Rome, because they needed it. I mean, in all the other different places, is that they didn't have any provisions, just even, food and just the basic needs to live. And so they had crosses. But we're called to carry our cross and come after me. So whoever does not cannot be my disciple.
I think maybe that could be related to the translation, because it definitely says hate it, but in other languages, when they translate, the sentence structure gets changed a lot. And it could be not liked as much,
Yeah, love less.
love less,
Yeah.
but not hate. Hate is a term where you turn away from the person and you try to ostracize them from yourself. I'm not sure that's what he means.
Well, that's a good point, because that's exactly the point that we're making here, is that he's saying all things have to be ordered, right? And so we're going to love these less than God. God has to be our first love, right? It has to be, and everything else will follow after that. But God has to be our first love, and so that's good. But I mean, we are called to calculate the costs of discipleship. He wants us to carefully calculate the costs. He wants us to be aware this is going to cost us something. So for all those who are part of the prosperity gospel, I don't know where that came from, but that's not what Jesus is talking about. He's not saying you're going to win the lotto if you become a Christian. No, you're going to have suffering, persecution. It's probably what's going to happen. And what happened to John and Peter? They were beaten. And they said, oh, we were able to get beaten for our Lord. I don't hear too many people saying that anymore, right? But that's the way they had it. But we should calculate the costs. Now, whenever we do something, we typically will say, okay, how much is this going to cost us? If we're going on a trip, we calculate the cost, right? If we're going to do a project or a design, anything, you calculate the cost. If you're going to sell your house, you say, okay, how much is this going to cost us? How much are we going to get? Everything else is figured out. If you're going to put up a building, you say, okay, these are all my costs. These are all the labor, material, equipment, overhead, everything else that's included. You calculate the costs. So when you're going to we got to know, what is it going to cost me to become a disciple of Jesus? And it can cost you a lot. There is a great cost, because everything has to be ordered for that. Jesus does say, my yoke is light. So give me cast upon your burdens upon me, but at the same time, it's going to cost you something. And so then he uses this couple of different times of, like, when a king marches into battle and he has 10,000 troops and the other guy has 20,000 troops, it's just being prudent. Well, we're going to get, destroyed if we, these guys are sitting around at the camel stop. They're not very good soldiers either. So how is this going to work out for us? So we'll send peace terms. And then same thing with somebody that's building a building. He lays the foundation, and then it's like, oh man, I don't have enough money for the wood. Or you get started. You see a lot of houses like that are started, and you have a shell or something, and then the rest of it's, and it's up for sale.
The particle board starts to rot.
Yeah. Yeah, and you do see that kind of thing. And so this is actually something we can relate to. This kind of thing still goes on. But he's bringing this, saying we need to have this common sense. We use it in the everyday things of life. Okay, what are the costs of doing these things? He's saying faith and reason, that's something that St. Augustine said too, is that it's faith and reason, it's both. It's not blind faith. It's also using our brain and reason, because when we do that, we're going to say, okay, I want to be a disciple, and it's going to cost me something. And anything that has value in your life probably cost you something. You had to put forth effort for it. It wasn't easy. There was dedication, there was time, there was commitment. It cost you. If whatever, anything you do in life to reach a certain level, you probably paid your dues to get to that point. And that's why it's valuable. There's value to it, because it wasn't just handed to you.
Tom, when you say there's an age limit, though, you said when we're born, we learned how to love Christ. I mean, we wouldn't know anything about Christ until we were going to Catholic school or something. First person I ever loved in my life was my mother.
Right.
You know, so I mean, I didn't know anything about
Oh,
loving
yeah.
Christ or anything.
Yeah, so that's a gift, and so I
Yeah.
think that's where different people get that gift of faith at different times.
Right, different age group.
Different, yeah. I mean, it could be, and some people get it early, some people get it later, and some people know about Jesus, but they don't have, I mean, they know, I mean, I actually knew, I won the morality award, but
Mhm.
I didn't have the gift of faith. I mean, it was very clear. I knew it like I went through all the, I went through all the sacraments, and I knew all the nuts and bolts of everything, right?
Look at the help.
Did my prayers, did rosaries, we did all that. I mean, as we were growing up, but I didn't really have that gift of faith. I mean, so I went away to college and I left my religion behind, and that's really, and I mentioned last week that 2/3 of people do that. So I guess it wasn't that uncommon, but I had the gift of faith when God grabbed a hold of me later on. And it was a gift, and I knew it was a gift. And the Catechism teaches that faith is a gift. And so I said yes, and I think even that saying yes, there was a grace involved in that. So that wasn't, all the good that came out of everything I've done is from God. And that's where I think it's important, is that people are at different stages in their life too. And so I think it's good to have a little bit of mercy on them and try to understand. I can usually say, well, I was like that person. And so that helps me to relate to them. And I think that's a way we can evangelize people too, is because it can be intimidating. I've had people say, well, I feel judged just by regular. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, if you grew up Catholic and and when you were, that's all you knew. And people can sometimes on the outside feel that they don't fit in, or they feel judged, or they don't, they can't relate to the person. And I think it's good to have, to relate to people and, invite them in. We got to be inviting too. We're called to evangelize, right? We're called to go out and preach the gospel to all people, and recognize that, people sometimes have had situations where they may have had bad, parents that didn't care about them. They may have had broken up families. I mean, if you look at, that's pretty typical nowadays, where they don't, the father and mother weren't there, and they didn't have, they ended up in a school where there was they never heard of, Christianity or anything else at that point. It was all about the things of the world. And so I think it's important that you may be the first person that is bringing, that they see Christ in. You may be that first person. And that really kind of resonated in me when I was in California, because I was like, these people are crazy. But then I realized, that they're in their own echo chamber in a sense. They heard, they all thought alike, they're all talking alike, and they didn't really have anybody that they could talk to that made sense. And one thing that struck me was, I was in a class with a woman, and she said something about her and her partner had, and they were having problems with their kids. And I was just said, well, I think the first thing that, do you bring them to church? I just ask questions like that. I just ask questions and, to help this lady, so I didn't know what she...
Think through.
Yeah, I didn't know what that meant, for her. I didn't ask. I just said, but I said, is God in your life? What's important? What are you, and so I had my thoughts of probably what it was, but she was very, very inquisitive, a very, very intelligent person. I mean, she was running probably $100 billion worth of, like government stuff. I mean, so she was very high up. She was you could tell she was just very intelligent, but she had no idea what to do. She was just completely confused about the basics. And I said, well, are you taking them to church? Are you doing, is there any kind of discipline? Just the basic things of life, like how to live, in a sense. But this was just like an alien came down out of the sky and was telling them these things. So I think that's where we have to realize is that we have this gift. I mean, we're here in this church and it's easy to look at things from our perspective, but people haven't had that opportunities. And even at other churches I've gone to, they may have had the same priest for 30, 40 years. And, he came from the kumbaya, I mean, it's like, and the things they're doing are a little bit off. I mean, a lot off, and they didn't know any better, a lot of them, and the catechism was terrible. And so, you go in there and you just pray, but I think that's important that we, we're not going to, I mean, it's going to take some time for this to, work its way through. And I think that's where, it's God's church, it's his bride. So, when I go there, I'm just being myself. We just try to be reverent, and we receive the Lord in a very reverent, and on our tongue, and sometimes people about have a stroke when you put out your tongue to receive, but they don't know any different. And so I think you have to, that's where we have to, we have to understand that these people they just don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And that's the problem. They're in there's darkness that has happened, and it's, the leaders of the church haven't really corrected the pattern they're going on. So they need good shepherds.